Greetings from my study. I know that many of us have been using this time of lockdown to catch up on some reading. Perhaps you, like me, have piles of books by the bed or on your desk that you just haven't got round to reading, and maybe at the moment it affords you a little more time to read. I hasten to add that I haven't read most of these books. Many of them belong to my husband, who is far more intellectual than I am, but they do make me look jolly intelligent sitting in front of them. I, on the other hand, prefer to read stories. I love fiction. I love being transported out of the now into the world of a book. But I'm the kind of reader, if I'm reading a story and I find that it's rather tense, I don't know how it's going to end, that I flick to the back of the book, to the last couple of pages, and I just cast my eye over it so that I know how the story ends, that everything will be all right in the end. Some people would of course say that rather ruins the reading experience, but for me it means I get to enjoy the story more because I know it will be okay. We're at the start of Holy Week, a week in which we remember part of the Christian story. We remember the last days and hours of Jesus' life, and we are in a position where we know the end of the story. We know what happens. So although there's great tragedy as part of the story of Holy Week, we know that it will be okay in the end, that God raises Jesus from the dead. But I've been thinking that it wasn't like that for the first disciples. They didn't know how the story would end. All sorts of things were happening that caused them great uncertainty and anxiety, fear, sadness. I imagine that they questioned their own judgment about why they followed Jesus in the first place, who Jesus was, whether he could be trusted, where God was in all that was happening. And it must have been incredibly difficult. And it strikes me that the experience of the first disciples speaks to our own experience at the moment, because many of us are feeling incredibly uncertain. Many are feeling fearful, anxious about what this might mean. I know that some of us are questioning where God is. Why is this happening? Is there a lesson that's to come from it? What's all of this for? And of course, we don't really have the answers. But I know for many people, the question that keeps coming up is, where's God in all of this? And as I've been thinking about that, I've been thinking about some of the stories in the Gospel, the ones that we read just in the final days before we read about Jesus' death. And first of all, there's a story of the death of Lazarus, and we read that Jesus wept over the death of his friend as Jesus coped with the loss of somebody that he loved. We also read at the start of Holy Week that Jesus went into the temple and he was enraged by seeing the moneylenders exploiting the poorest people, and he threw the tables over because of the injustice that he could see. And then the night before Jesus died, we read that Jesus went by himself in the garden, knelt down, wept and said to God, "Please take this cup of suffering from me." Where is God at the moment? Where do you think God is? Because I think for me, God is right here with us. He's with us in the experience of loss when we weep over the loss of a loved one. He is here when we're angry about the things in our world that are wrong. We're angry that it's those who are the poorest and the most vulnerable who suffer the most. And he's with us when we say, God, make this go away, make it stop, take this cup of suffering from us. There are no easy answers. There are no simple responses to what's happening and why it's happening and when it will end. We simply don't know. But what I believe is that God is here. He's here, right with us, in the midst of all this uncertainty and fear. I hope you find him this week.